one of the key lines that came out yesterday was kind of what seemed to be Donald Trump's road to Damascus, like realization of the situation in Gaza, and twice at least had suggested some sort of appeal to Netanyahu to get a grip and change the one of the quotes was to change the strategy in Gaza. You mentioned earlier on, he was saying that from what he can see on television, the situation is dire. Starvation is rife. I think today there was a report this morning saying that famine conditions are basically arriving in Gaza. I mean, they've been arriving for weeks and weeks, but I think it's now becoming formalized that most of the population of Gaza is suffering famine conditions. And Donald Trump's solution to that is to provide 4 more aid sites.
Yeah.
Just on that, there were a couple of months ago 400 aid sites in Gaza. And when Israel and America, Israel sponsored by America, I should say, launched the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, that went from 400 to 4. The 400 aid sites were operated by the UN. These 4 aid sites are operated by the Israeli government. And the last couple of weeks, if you've been seeing that there are mass murder events happening near aid sites, it's because the 4 aid sites that the Gaza Humanitarian Fund are operate either at the end of or in the middle of militarized zones, which is a breach of international law. They need to be in neutral zones where there is no military activity happening. Israel have decided that these are the locations that the sites are in. I think it was either Haaretz or Bethlehem. I think it was Haaretz that had an interview with an Israeli soldier that revealed that the instructions from on high in the IDF was to indiscriminately shoot at people that were seeking aid at these aid sites. And so I wonder that when you've got these 4 aid sites that are in these precarious locations and you're proposing to have 4 more, I'm not sure that is going to change much on the ground.
But it is, I guess, even if materially we don't see a shift from the US immediately, there is definitely a tone shift. And it's not just coming from the US. Like, there's been a tone shift from media outlets in the past week or so as well. Like, you had the open letter from the BBC and the AFP saying that they were very concerned about the number of journalists that had been killed.
But that's interesting as well, right?
But then also, like, the reporting on, like you said, the killings at aid sites has been, like, the front page of the BBC, of, like, The Guardian, of a lot of newspapers this week. And we've seen a tone shift from MPs. There was the open letter to recognise Palestine. And today at this meeting, which is like a recess, the ministers have been recalled from recess, and they're going to talk about recognising Palestine as well.
That part, so like with the BBC and other news organizations releasing that statement last week, there have been one of the parts of this has been the amount of information that is not getting out of Gaza because of the refusal of the Israeli government to allow journalists into Gaza during the war. Number one. Number two, the amount of deaths of journalists that are in Gaza during the last year and a half. But also, the point I'm getting at is journalists have been killed for years in either Gaza or the West Bank by the IDF. One of the most notable ones in recent times was Shireen Abu Akleh, who was an Al Jazeera journalist, I think. And such was the kind of the spectacle of her death that even at her funeral, the Israeli military were present and tried to break up the funeral procession. And nothing happened then. And there was no concern from international organizations of how the Israeli army was conducting itself then. You're right. There is a tone shift in how the media and politicians are conducting themselves or approaching this issue. But when you've got, like, the Prime Minister a couple of weeks into the whole thing said that Israel has the right to cut off food and water to Gaza. And now, after one of the strongest European allies has decided to recognize Palestine, he now decides that it's appropriate to do so.
Definitely.
You know, so, and like, I mean, that also brings into question what is he going to do about the not sale of F-35 parts to Israel, but rather the placing of parts of F-35s into this box over here that the Israeli government may or may not be taking.
We had no idea who's using the parts then after
Exactly. So doing things like that, prescribing organizations, having court cases against musicians, investigating other musicians, recognizing the state whilst you've done all of that for the last year and a half, I'm not sure is enough.
It's the Omar El-Akkad thing, the one day everyone will have always been against this. Like, it's the tone shift saying, isn't this terrible what's going on in Gaza, even though it's been going on for the last, 2 years and prior. But one day, like, they'll just look back, like, we're always against this. It was always a genocide. It was always this. Shall we hear from someone from the UN, James Elder, who was on the ground in Gaza to play out this episode?
Yeah, good idea. James Elder is the UN international spokesperson. He's a spokesperson for the UN. He's been to Gaza 5 times in the last year and a half, and he's been specifically investigating the situation on the ground for children in Gaza. And on that, we'll see you next time.
During the ceasefire, when we really started making a difference, you see malnutrition go down, you see access to water go down, go up, you see medicines increase. During that ceasefire, there were 400 distribution points, right, across the Gaza Strip. At its core, humanitarian aid is 2 things. One is to go where people need it, and the other is to make sure you're looking at your evidence that the humanitarian aid you're bringing in is changing the game. So 400 distribution sites. Now that you and I are speaking, there's 1 GHF site. So that alone would just be like, well, hang on, this is ridiculous. But it is being used to try and sideline a humanitarian system that's didn't just work 2 months ago in Gaza, but works in Sudan, Ethiopia, Ukraine. It works the world over. So I've had, journalists who are almost exasperated, Sean, say, but come on, look, it's obviously there for good now. Can't you go to help it? Well, there's a couple of things. One is that, again, 400 distribution sites, there's no reason for this to be sidelined, except there are very clear statements made by Israeli officials that there is an aim to push a population south. So it's using aid as bait. You can't support that. Obviously, 1 distribution site, you're talking about the elderly, you're talking about the wounded, you're talking about kids, you're talking about single mums. You can't walk 30 miles to get your food. So there's that. Beyond all of these, and we shouldn't have to go beyond any of those, is it's in a militarized zone. So humanitarian aid has to be in a deconflicted site. You can't ask people to walk through a militarized zone to get to food. That's what's been done. And as we've now seen, 15, 20 examples where people are walking on that small channel and they are being, the IDF has had multiple occasions when they've been shooting people. I've spoken to at least 20 people who spoke to going to these sites, Sean, being corralled into like a cage, quadcopter above. As one guy said, we did nothing wrong. I just sat there and suddenly people were being shot from a quadcopter. Why did they do this, James? I've spoken to children who've been killed at these sites. I can speak to that. So I've never seen something so clearly where, on principle, it doesn't work. You need more distribution sites. You can't ask people to walk through a militarised zone. What about the elderly? I've held elderly in tears. But then to see it in practice, it is so much more damaging than I ever imagined. Not just because people are being killed there, not just because it's not serving the most vulnerable population, but Because it is deliberately trying to sideline a humanitarian system that is multiple agencies, 400 sites. Humanitarian aid is not just food in a box. It's incubators, it's hygiene kits for girls, it's tents, it's oxygen. So it's one of the most dangerous things I've seen. And I guess my last point, Sean, is that it's a worrying precedent. You know, you'll suddenly see armies and wars around the world where people realize, oh, we don't need the UN. We choose who gets aid and we just do it from here. That should be horrifying for people if we look at the way war is descending.
You've been watching a clip from the Politics Joe podcast. If you'd like to watch the rest, please head to patreon.com/PoliticsJOE. It's the only place you can watch podcast episodes in full for as little as £4 a month. You get access to the video podcast as well as the group chat, and you get first access to live event tickets. The first of which is happening in just over a week's time. We're very excited. It's sold out in 4 minutes. We're very excited to have a beer, have a chat, have a natter with all of you. So we will see you then. £4 a month, patreon.com/PoliticsJOE.